podcasts with Life Med,
Here we discuss topics how to become healthier and happier,
using different tools of lifestyle medicine and modern science.
such as nutrition, meditation, and other holistic approaches.
We as medical doctors, with our rich and profound clinical experience, serve as a bridge.
Between modern science and holistic Eastern approaches to health.
Dear Professor Willett, thank you so much for inviting us here in Boston just to discuss this such important topic as nutrition. We are super happy to be here and we appreciate a lot your work. And thank you for everything you are doing, you have done and still doing for the nutrition of science, for people, for public, because it has helped, it has changed our practice and it has helped thousands and thousands of people. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you here in Boston.
You are the world leading scientist in the field of nutrition, epidemiology, and medicine, most cited scientist in the world as well. And you have published more than 2,000 scientific papers and several books. And you are an author of so famous planetary diet, which helps and is helping a lot of people throughout the world. And can you introduce yourself to people who may not know you? Well, maybe.
Well, I'm a physician. I grew up in the Midwest and in a situation in the middle of an agricultural world that really led me to mostly have an animal-based diet when I was growing up. But I got interested in medicine and went to medical school and then specialized in internal medicine and realized along the way that diet was really very interesting. And so I, after spending some time working in Africa, came back and did a doctoral degree in epidemiology, bringing in my nutritional background and putting together nutrition and also epidemiology, which is the study of basically how to keep people healthy over their lifetime. That's our real goal. And so it's been fascinating for me to be able to look at these issues in a large population, several large populations of several 100,000 people who we've been following for more than 40 years now, learning about how what they eat affects their long-term health and well-being. And we've learned a lot during that time.
Would you maybe name some most prominent studies which have changed practice of clinicians and maybe even diets and management of in nutrition and patient management at all?
Probably the most fundamental, you might call it discovery, we had. It wasn't uniquely our discovery, but what we saw during our follow-up of our several 100,000 people was that people who were consuming the lowest fat in the diet, the smallest amount of fat, which was the recommendation at that time when we started back in the 1980s, they were not necessarily healthier than the people with higher fat intake. But what was really important was that the type of fat was strongly important. There were some fats that were not healthy fats. Trans fat was the worst type of fat. And fortunately, on the basis of our data and confirmation by other people, trans fat has now been eliminated. It's really illegal to use that in the United States and most of Europe and most countries around the world. Now, saturated fat, also not so good, but not as bad as trans fat. But on the other hand, healthy fats like polyunsaturated fat and monounsaturated fat that we get from plant oils, liquid plant oils, are related quite strongly to better health, lower risks of heart disease, diabetes, and many other conditions. As it turned out, what we were seeing pretty well describes the Mediterranean diet, which quite separately has been shown to be related to very great longevity and well-being.
If we speak about trans fats, what do you mean by that? Because will be a lot of usual people watching us, and they will be asking, what kind of products are? What does it mean, trans fats? What is it?
Well, the good thing is that people don't need to worry too much about trans fat. I think probably in your own country, trans fat is pretty much gone. Is that not?
It's
Maybe
still
only in cookies, and
so it may be there in some places, but very briefly, and maybe it will be gone entirely, hopefully in a few years. But trans fat is created by the industrial process called partial hydrogenation. And this process takes a natural liquid fat like soybean oil or olive oil, rapeseed oil, and heats it up to a high temperature, bubbles hydrogen through the plant oil, and then it becomes solid. And it becomes solid because that process twists the shape of molecules that are essential for many processes, for clotting, for inflammation, for heart rate arrhythmias. And also we see that trans fat increases bad cholesterol in our blood, the LDL cholesterol, and lowers HDL, the good cholesterol. So trans fat does everything bad. And we get trans fat if products like cookies or cakes, or in the past, some margarines were the main source. That, I think, has been eliminated in most places now, but other parts of the world, like in India, the typical fat is ghee, and that's still very high in trans fat in some parts of the world. So there's been progress in this area, but there's still some way to go before we get trans fat off the table entirely. Well, saturated fat was thought to be the entire villain 20 years ago, I would say. And what we've seen is that it's good to keep saturated fat low, but it doesn't explain everything. So it's part of the picture, but not the whole picture like had been thought. So if we compare, it depends what we compare a nutrient to. If we compare saturated fat to refined starch or sugar, which are not so healthy, they look about equal in terms of saturated fat for heart disease risk, and it's good to keep both of those quite low. On the other hand, if we compare saturated fat to unsaturated fats, and there are several kinds of unsaturated fats, then the unsaturated fats are far better than saturated fat. So again, most of the liquid plant oils are mostly unsaturated fats. Olive oil, rapeseed oil, soybean oil are the most commonly used. Although actually in part of the world, and this may be an interesting issue where you work, sunflower oil is a major source of fat. I've been in Bulgaria, and everywhere you go,
Yes.
sunflowers.
That's true.
It's cultural,
Yeah, and it's a good oil, except it's deficient in omega-3 fatty acids, and that's really important because we need both omega-3 fatty acids and omega-6 fatty acids that are really high in sunflower oil. So if we're only getting our fat from sunflower oil, that can lead to high rates of heart disease. And I just noticed recently the highest rates of heart disease used to be in Northern Europe. Now it's in sort of Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, Ukraine, that area. And I suspect that a lot of that is because there's not much omega-3 fatty acid in the diet. Now, where do we get omega-3 fatty acids? That's an obvious question. You're right. I'm sure you're going to ask that.
Yes, we want to do that.
That will be the next question.
Right, yeah. Yes. The traditional main way is by fish consumption. But in parts of the world, there's just not much fish. And in Central Asia, particularly far from the ocean, there's generally not much fish around. We did a study in India, Central India. We just couldn't find any fish being consumed at all there.
Another problem, major problem.
It has to be good, healthy fish. But also, fortunately, rapeseed oil is quite high in omega-3 fatty acids. So, that's quite available in Europe now. So I think using a combination of sunflower oil and rapeseed oil is a way to get omega-3 fatty acids along with omega-6. It depends on which nuts and which seeds. Walnuts have a very good amount of omega-3 fatty acid. But again, some seeds, of course, sunflower seeds have almost no omega-3 fatty acids. It's all omega-6 fatty acids. But nuts are walnuts are a pretty unique source. Most other nuts don't have too many omega-3 fatty acids in them. Again, they're all healthy and good, but we need both. we do need balance in nutrition.
Mm-hmm. So basically what you're saying, because before there were an opinion that would be better, doing better regarding heart health if we avoid all oils, if we keep them like as low as possible or like zero oils, and maybe just take some healthy fats from nuts and seeds and maybe from fish in a small amount. But now what I'm hearing is like it's healthy, it's okay to use oils as far as it's a good oil and it's not too much.
Right, yes. And maybe several good oils too. Yeah. Again, sunflower oil is a good oil, but by itself it's not complete. And so, yeah, the fat I would go to normally is extra virgin olive oil if that's available. And I think it's important that we do try to increase production of olive oil where we can, but in cold climates we can't grow it. We can't grow it here in northern United States and in much of Europe. But in southern Europe, it's been, as you know, grown for thousands of years, and probably is a very important reason that the Greek, Italian populations have been extremely healthy compared to most other places when they were studied a few decades ago, back in the 1950s and 60s. But interestingly, Northern Europe, Finland, that did have the highest heart disease rates in the world, replaced their butter fat with mostly rapeseed oil, and their heart disease rates have come down 80%. And now they're no longer the highest heart disease rates. They no longer have the highest heart disease rates in the world. And it has shifted. So fat is, just as you say, it's not necessarily bad. There are bad fats and there are good fats. And we do see that replacing some of the unhealthy carbohydrates with healthy fats is actually a step in the right direction.
Amazing. I wanted to ask you, the nutrition is such a controversial topic, especially for people. They know, okay, the healthy diet is important. What they do normally, they go online, they search, and then what they found is just a lot of misleading information, and they get lost. They're trying to follow all these fancy diets, which are not evidence-based, and as a result, the health is not getting better. It's sometimes even getting worse. So some recommendations are even dangerous. Some diets are dangerous. So what do you think, first of all, is it like reliable source of information for people just to search online, or do they need somebody like the person they trust? And also, why is this happening? Because we have you here as a number one scientist in the world. We have a planetary diet. It was also presented in UN, and like everybody should know about that. And why there are still a lot of misguidance.
And the main question would be, why is true science and real science is not so easy available to public all over the world? Maybe in some countries it's better, we know, but in some countries it's not very available to usual people and clinicians, which is very important too. And even clinicians, they go online, they use like fancy diets, and they keep saying about telling patients about keto diets and even with heart disease. Why does it happen? Yeah.
Yes, it's what you describe is a very real problem, and I think if I did not have training and being engaged in research like I am, I would be confused. I think it's natural that most people are confused because there is so much misinformation. Some of it is clearly for profit. Some of it is because the medical community and medical education system has not incorporated nutrition in teaching doctors. And as you say, people should be able to go to someone they trust, like their doctor, and get good information. But the reality is that doctor is very unlikely to have had serious up-to-date training in nutrition. Even if they did have a little bit on nutrition 30 years ago, of course, that's going to be pretty out of date by now. So how to communicate the right information, the best information, is a challenge. That unfortunately there's not such profit motivation to transmit just information that as compared to selling a very expensive supplement or something like that.
And we see
there's a lot out there.
A lot of that.
So We've been working on this. One way that I did write a book called Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy that's available in quite a few languages now, to try to put together in one place what we've learned over decades of research. What I did that partly because I found that even my colleagues I'm working with didn't know a lot of this because they were working on one part of the picture and didn't know what, even in the same research department, they didn't know what was being learned in another part of our department. So I thought it was really important to put this together. And I worked with a science writer to make it accessible to the general public, not just scientists. Then I also work with medical education, that we have a program for physicians. And now the good news is that most physicians, or many physicians I haven't taken a survey, but many are very interested in learning about this. We have a course we teach with the Culinary Institute of America. And so they teach how to put knowledge into practice, making healthy meals that are enjoyable, and we provide the science behind that. And so we have a course once a year it'll be in February. It sold out last June. So there is a lot of interest on the part of physicians. We also work with medical organizations. But one thing we achieved this past year, it doesn't sound like too much, but it was really important. We pushed the National Medical Examination Board, the people who write the examination, to include some questions on nutrition, because they're doing it. They're going to do that, and if it's there in the exam, then you have to teach it. So that, in some ways, it's a lever to get nutrition into the curriculum, because it hasn't been there. It's a huge deficiency when there are estimates that maybe something like a third of deaths or maybe more are related to poor nutrition. So it should be a high priority and not being taught. It's just,
and it's surprising.
Such dissonance.
Yeah, you start thinking, go like, aware of, as physicians say, I used to be a surgeon, and I didn't know, I knew almost nothing about nutrition. And it sounds crazy, because as you said, the doctors should be the first people who should know a lot of things about nutrition and should consult the patients, and that's why probably they go online and searching online on very often unreliable sources, because they do not have support from their physicians or from their healthcare professionals or dietitians maybe. They do not get the up-to-date science from them. And then they think, okay, even if I get some advice from my doctor and it doesn't work, so okay, I'll go and search further.
But it's so painful for me, because I work with a lot of patients, with a lot of people who are interested in their health. They have this passion. They want to know, what do I eat? And they just get lost, and they get such a unscientific advices from other specialists, even like doctors or nutrition specialists. And here I'm glad we just make it clear that diets high in saturated fat, like keto diet and like carnivore diet, it's not
going to be a healthy long-term diet, right? Some people may lose some weight initially, but for the long term, it's not going to be a healthy way to eat. One other thing we do is we do have our website called Nutrition Source. And if you just Google Nutrition Source, it can be found there, which is meant to provide this information on an up-to-date basis. So we're continuing to add to that. But I think we have to try to work on all of these directions, because there's so much information that, and we do have information now. When I started in internal medicine, and people asked me to teach medical students, actually I said, I can't, I don't know what to tell them, because we didn't have the research available at that time, which is why we established these long-term studies. But now we have lots of data we're still learning some details, but the big picture is quite clear.
And maybe you can mention this big picture, like the healthy plate. So what this healthy diet looks like?
Yes, basically it's not too complicated. The healthy plate would be about half of the plate being fruits and vegetables, and as fresh generally as possible, but frozen is also very good. And if out of season, dried fruit can also be good as well. And then our national plate says grains, but what's really important that it be whole grains, that not refined grains, that refined grains have most of the nutrition removed from it. It's mostly just starch, which can have adverse metabolic effects. And then the protein part of the plate is really makes a big difference because in our Northern European traditional diet, the protein would mostly be meat and dairy products. But we've seen that that's not going to lead to the best health. Like in the traditional Mediterranean diet, those were there, but they were small parts of the protein sources. It was mostly plant sources like nuts and legumes and soy products too, and seeds, of course. Those are healthy protein sources because it's not just that the protein is different, but those sources of protein come with unsaturated fats, fiber, lots of minerals, lots of vitamins, and they go with low amounts of saturated fat, and of course, no trans fat at all, and no cholesterol at all. So that's the basic plate. Dairy products can also be there, but usually about one serving a day is, I think, a good target for dairy products. They don't have to be removed. They don't have to be included, but if someone would like to have some dairy products, I think about one serving a day could be a glass of milk, or probably even a little better to be some cheese or yogurt. And there's some evidence that yogurt has some positive health benefits. But again, traditional Northern European diets were, and our current dietary recommendations are for 3 servings of dairy a day, which is that's too much. And then it's not on the plate necessarily visualized, but we have on our healthy plate a bottle of plant oil. That olive oil is good, but it could be a blend of sunflower oil and rapeseed oil, some combination of that. We do use quite a bit of added fat to prepare foods or to put on our vegetables if we cook them, or on our salads, and that can actually be healthy, a positive part of the diet. We don't want to try to eliminate those healthy fats.
Amazing. So basically what we're seeing, traditionally there is a meat, the big piece of meat in just on the middle of the plate, and a bit of veggies on the side. And the healthy diet or healthy plate would be when we're moving the meat on the side, we are also taking some healthier proteins, like plant-based proteins, adding to the plate and focusing on the fresh veggies and whole grains. So basically the meat goes from the center of the plate to the side.
Yeah, we discussed this like 180 degree like complete conversion. So in the center, you center around plants, yeah, and then if you want to, you're flexible. You may add some animal-based products, but in certain amounts. And we're gonna come to that as well. So it's kind of 180 degree switch,
right,
isn't it?
The balance, yes,
right. The balance, yes.
Right, yes, yeah. That's the idea, and again, it's flexible. Some people would like to be a vegan, and that's okay. But they do need to be sure they get some source of vitamin B12, because on a purely plant-based diet, there will be some B vitamins that will be too low. But it's just a normal, inexpensive supplement can provide that if someone wants to be a strict vegan. But that's a very good description. We're really just turning the balance 180 degrees.
Because I remember myself when I used to eat meat. So what I thought, in the center, what shall I cook today? What kind of big portion of meat or fish shall I cook? And then when we went deep into science, I started thinking in a different way. Okay, I'd center myself around plants. And then, okay, if I want to, I may add a bit of fish one day and a bit of cheese another day. And it gives me a bit of flexibility, so I'm not restricted. But on the other side, I'm eating a healthy diet. What does it mean, actually, the healthy diet? And why do we need a healthy diet? And what do we gain? What do people gain by following a healthy diet? And what do they avoid? That's two things that I think they're quite important to motivate people. What would you say about that?
Well, it looks like a healthy diet can add a number of years to of someone's life of healthy years. Of course, if we just added years or more time being sick at the end, most people wouldn't want that. But what we've seen with switching to a healthy diet, we can add, if we combine it with physical activity and not smoking, we can add about 10 years of healthy years and not increase the unhealthy years at all. So, but it's not just that sort of average additional years. When I started medical school, and it was in the 1960s, it was common for men to have a heart attack and die at age 50 or 55. We virtually don't see that anymore. And we, of course, we're still not as nearly as healthy as we should be. We have other issues, but it's sort of playing the odds. There was a very good chance that, especially men, would drop dead of a heart attack at age 50 or 55, and reducing the odds of that is another way of looking at that. It's not just the average number of years that we add, but your odds of having something go really bad are greatly reduced by having a healthy diet.
Yeah, that's true. And what I'm seeing from my clinical experience, that people also they start to shy. So they feel and they get more energetic. They don't have digestive issues anymore, better skin, like better mood, like everything gets better. So it's amazing.
Yes, that's a really important observation. And most of our work, our research actually is focused on preventing bad things, heart attacks and cancers and things like that. I was actually surprised a little bit myself when I published the book for the general public called Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy. And after a few weeks, I started getting lots of letters and emails. Oh, thank you so much. I feel better. I'm in control now. And we don't measure that very well in our research, but there is clearly that positive benefit that people feel soon. You don't have to wait 30 years to get the benefit.
And that's a great benefit. Yeah, that's a great benefit. But you want to live a happy life, like full of energy life, not just, okay, I'm preventing something. You want to be full of energy and happy. Yeah.
So that's a really important point. That the benefits you don't have to wait years to prevent something. It's how we feel on a day-to-day basis is clearly very important.
Yeah. And what do you think? Is it difficult to follow such a diet for people? Because I think it's such an incredible diet because there are no kind of restrictions. You can eat everything in moderation, and you know how much is the moderation, and you don't feel restricted at all. So I find it's very joyful and easy to follow. What do you think?
Yes, I think it really is quite easy. Actually, the way I think of what I'm going to eat on a day-to-day basis is very simple. It's 1 + 1. That the base is whole grains. That's just all we have is whole grains. It may be oats in the morning. It may be some whole grain bread or some brown rice in the evening. Lots of different kind of ways to have whole grains, and a variety of fruits and vegetables and nuts, and then for protein sources, most of it will be plant protein sources, but then about 2 servings of animal source protein a day. So it's 1 of dairy and 1 of something else, and that's really easy, I find, but a way to think about it. And if you would like to, just as you're describing, instead of a big piece of red meat, have it as a small piece on a side, and actually having a salad, which I sometimes do for a whole meal, is make a big salad, and there can be a little fish in it, or a bit of chicken, or it could be a little bit of beef. But if you really like to have a very big piece of meat, then you can have that about once a month. And actually in the traditional Mediterranean culture, on Easters and a few special holidays, people did have a very substantial portion of usually lamb in that circumstance. But then on the other days, there would be much more plant-based. So as you say, there's a huge amount of flexibility here. There's no single way, but I sort of find that 1 + 1 serving, 1 dairy, 1 of something else, is a very easy way to do it.
Look, can I have a question? You mentioned about 1 dairy. Do we have to take dairy every day, or for our bones or for calcium? Because there is a perception that we have to eat dairy every day. What if we don't eat dairy every day, or for example, when we want to, or if we don't eat dairy at all?
Right. Well, that's a very good point. And the standard wisdom in the nutrition world has been that we need a very large amount of calcium. But if we've known for 30, 40 years that the countries that have the highest dairy intake are the northern countries in Scandinavia, United States, and Netherlands, and they've had the highest fracture rates in the world, not the lowest fracture rates. The lowest fracture rates are actually the countries that don't have any dairy. And most of those are in Asia and some in Africa. So dairy is clearly not essential. And we do need calcium. That is essential. But how much calcium we need has probably been overstated. The studies that have been used to set the requirements are studies that last just about a few weeks or a few months, whereas we need to look for calcium balance. We need studies that last several years at a minimum. But it's a question. If we have no dairy at all, whether we should take a supplement to make sure we get enough calcium, I think there's some uncertainty when we get down to a quite low amount of dairy, or not any dairy at all. Personally, I think if someone is having no dairy, it's reasonable to take a supplement of about 500 milligrams a day. And that's very inexpensive, it costs much less than a milk. There's no calories, no saturated fat, no cholesterol. And that on top of a reasonable plant-based diet will give you plenty of calcium.
What about greens? If the person eats like a good amount of greens every day, we know they're rich in calcium and it's bioavailable, can they still have no dairy at all and no supplements also? So can they balance?
I think that's possible. But some of the calcium in the greens may not be as absorbed quite as well. And again, it's clear that there are cultures around the world that had no dairy and low fracture rates. So definitely you don't have to have supplements or dairy, but as a little safety net.
Yeah, I see.
It's reasonable to take a supplement if you're at all concerned about that. I think in general, an adult will get enough if they do have an overall healthy diet. But as a safety net, where we can't be quite sure if just a little bit more might be better, a supplement is okay. And actually, the one area where some additional calcium seems to be most beneficial is not for bones, but for colorectal cancer. That we have seen that, and that's been confirmed in many studies now. So that does I lean a little bit more on the side of, if you're having no dairy, to take a modest supplement, but one with vitamin D in it as well, because there are many people who don't get enough vitamin D. We're seeing, especially in the colder climates, because we're inside. And now in the summertime, we try to cover our skin, or we use sunblock to not have skin cancer. And so when we look at our national surveys, there's quite a few people who otherwise have a really good diet, otherwise exercising, doing everything right, but are low in vitamin D. And there's no food that actually has adequate amount of vitamin D in it. So we normally get it from the sun, but our modern life has led us to be inside and more disconnected from the sun. So taking a supplement is actually not a bad idea, and you can easily get a supplement that's vitamin D with some calcium. It's good to aim for, I think, about 800 or 1,000 international units.
That's quite a small amount.
Right. Unless somebody's really out in the sun a lot. There's now clearly many with really low vitamin D levels. There are quite a few problems, including bone issues. But there's, I think, quite strong evidence now that there's increased risk of dementia with low vitamin D levels. So it's something that, again, it's very cheap and easy to fix, to deal with, and just as a safety net to make sure we're going to get enough.
Yeah, you mentioned dementia, and I may ask another important question. What are other significant or scientifically significant lifestyle changes, important lifestyle changes, which people should know about to live a longer and happier life? Because we know nutrition is a very important, but to be a in a good shape, in a cognitive shape as well, and to live a good quality life, to reduce the risk of dementia, what are other factors people should think of as well, apart from nutrition?
Right, that's a really important point. And just a few years ago, we really had no idea about whether dementia was preventable, or at least we could reduce our risk of getting dementia. That some of it is genetic, as you're well aware, but clearly we're seeing that there's a lot we can do to reduce our risk of dementia. Just like we can't be 100% sure we're going to prevent cancer with diet and lifestyle, but we could put the odds in our favor, strongly in our favor, is what we'd like to do. And so one thing is avoiding overweight and obesity, which is good for reducing risks of many things. Regular physical activity, there's strong evidence that will help reduce the risk of dementia. But now we're seeing a lot of benefits from a healthy diet as well. And several factors, we mentioned having adequate vitamin D, or could say the other way, avoiding low vitamin D. But the other aspects of the diet are really important. And when we've looked overall, the whole Mediterranean dietary pattern is related very consistently in many studies to lower risk of dementia. And when we dig down more deeply, this seems to be coming from several parts of that healthy diet, but most importantly from vegetables and some fruits as well, and particularly the high carotenoid vegetables that are dark orange and dark green leafy vegetables have large amounts of beta-carotene and some other related carotene compounds. And those are related substantially to lower risk of dementia as well. So that fits very well with the whole planetary health diet pattern that we're describing. So if one is eating that dietary pattern, it does reduce the odds of having cognitive decline and dementia. There's actually a very interesting study done by our colleagues here, the Physicians' Health Study, that was a randomized trial of about 25,000 physicians that looked at beta-carotene and aspirin. And the beta-carotene didn't seem to reduce cancer risk, and other studies found that it didn't either. And given in a high concentration, actually seemed to elevate cancer risk a little bit. But at the end of the study, after 13 years, and this study went on for an unusually long time, the people on the beta-carotene the beta-carotene pill had better cognitive function compared to the placebo. So I'm not suggesting that people take a beta-carotene pill, but it does provide quite strong proof that those vegetables high
rich in plants,
that we see that is really truly reducing dementia risk.
Yeah. And I wanted to briefly mention about, yes, movement is very important, like exercise, movement is very important as well. What about stress management and sleep? Are they quite important as well? Because we know some people, they try to live a healthy lifestyle or eat healthy diets, but they don't move around, and they are under a lot of stress, pressure. They don't want how to deal with the stress. Is it also important to live a healthy life and to balance life?
Right. There's a lot of attention on stress, reducing stress and getting adequate sleep now. But it's not an all or nothing situation. We've looked at some of this, and a little stress actually seems to be beneficial, that we pay attention to things that are good for us. But too much stress, like so many things, it's like even an essential nutrient, too much is not good. Too much is not good, and too little is not good. We want to be in that sweet spot in the middle where we have a little stress is okay, but not too much, which can be quite harmful. And sleep too. That there's been a lot of the recommendations are to get 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night, but our data don't suggest that everybody needs to get that amount of sleep. And it's fine, but I think most of us would have a hard time doing what we do with that much sleep, but getting down to close to 5 hours of sleep a night, there things start to be risks of multiple diseases start to go up. So I think we should pay attention to our bodies. Mindfulness, relaxation is learning how to be calm and practice that actually can be very helpful to people. There are many practices that have used this traditionally, and clearly and our lives are often excessively stressed, and some of those mindfulness practices will lower blood pressure, we can see, and almost for sure reduce cardiovascular disease. And the way we design our environment is very important too. This is not all an issue of individual decision-making, that in many places and increasingly around the world, there are cities that have just packed together no parks, no trees, no places to safely walk, to exercise. We're lucky in Boston here because, interestingly, it is nice. And we're fortunate because there was a movement about 150 years ago of urban architecture where the underlying belief was that people should be able to have some place where they could have seed green leaves, trees, and have a sense of nature. And so a whole park system, we call it the Emerald Necklace, was developed in Boston, mostly for mental health. But we actually now, with all our research, see it's actually really important for physical health as well, that it allows people to ride bicycles, to walk safely, to play, and have relaxation. So having that, creating that and protecting that environment is really important, because we lost some of it here in the 1960s when it was cities were just a place to build superhighways and have cars pass through, and some of our best parks were damaged by that. We're getting them back now. We're having to tear down some of the highways and replace them back with green space.
Thanks for mentioning all those factors. It's very important still to stay connected with nature, and especially about mentioning meditation or mindfulness practices. They're very important. We have a lot of studies now, especially now in this not always steady times, and with a lot of stress. We've seen a lot of studies. They help with the depression, they help with anxiety, stress levels, and even for pain, and just to live a good quality of life. Overall, if we see this flexitarian or planetary diet as healthy both for people and for the planet, which is also important.
Yeah, very important, and I think in some ways even more important, because we can't have a healthy population with an unhealthy environment. And as you're quite aware, in this summer made crystal clear, climate change is happening so fast, and the problem is that some of the changes that are occurring are going to be irreversible, like the sea level rises and from melting ice caps in Greenland and the polar area. So if we don't change course there, it's not going to be possible to come back to a healthy environment. So that even though I do most of my research now on direct human health, the environment, I'm spending most of my time looking at how our food relates to climate change and environmental health, because if we neglect that, we can't come back in 100 years and say it's time to eat a healthy diet.
So important. Thanks very much for your time today, and it's so precious. And we'll tell people the truth and the science, and to a lot of people, so they change diets, and they change diets of their children, and not only improving their health, but again give contribution to planet as well. Thanks a lot again for your time.
Well, my pleasure, and thank you for fulfilling this critical role of translating what we learned in science to something that will be helpful to people in their everyday lives.
Yeah,
thank you.
And we tell this truth to not only to people, to doctors, physicians, and nutrition specialists as well. And actually, they're often very surprised when they hear this knowledge, because they don't get too deep to the science. They take from surface, and it's most of the time, unfortunately, in some areas of the world, it's wrong. It's completely wrong. So thank you a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you, and have a good trip home.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.